the last 2 years. I know last year we received $1,800. There was a small percentage decrease in the amount. So we're requesting these funds help our organization and the Historic Properties Commission secure the reenactors and the demonstrators, pay for signage, publicity, things of that nature. When I say pay for people to come to the event, participate, we have folks who do music. We have not only for the event but afterwards for the reenactors. There are a number of costs associated with signage and things of that nature. So we've had what we feel like is a great deal of success over the past 3 years. We've had a number of folks that we had to spend a pretty good bit of time contacting folks who had participated years ago that had stopped participating. And in saying that, there are still folks that we're working on trying to get here. One of the difficult parts about the event is it's in June. So it's extremely, extremely hot that day, but we feel like we're doing a good job. The crowds are good, albeit the heat, but we feel like people are giving us positive comments about the event and how it's changed, how it's yet stayed the same. So we feel like the event's going well. There are people coming from lots of different places. We've had some of the same speakers, Dan Barefoot, Howard Burnham, and this past year we had Dr. Tony Zeitz, the president of Central Piedmont Community College, who came and spoke, who has actually recently written a book. So he came to not only speak, but to try to sell some copies of the book as well. So, can I answer any questions on all of that?
Questions for Mr. Hart? It is an excellent event. I have enjoyed going the past 2 years and learned a lot. And it is a very good event. I would like to see it. I would like to see it bigger, though. That is, this community needs to embrace that and to make that one of the biggest things we have going on. That was a big event for North Carolina, well, for our country.
We'll keep working hard toward that. For sure. Can you change the date? Well, I will say.
Yeah, I didn't say I want to do that.
Well, we hear that a lot, and I mean, one of the things that's interesting is that the county puts about $7,000 towards the event, which sounds like a lot of money, but when you have to pay folks to come in and participate, it can be very difficult. And as other folks who plan events know, one of the largest expenses is porta-johns. So when you spend close to between $1,500 and $2,000 on porta-johns, it's difficult. But the heat is difficult, and we have a number of participants who would like to see the date change, and then we have another group of participants who are dead set on keeping that date as close to the event as the date of the battle as possible.
Sure.
So we have two groups that are sort of vying to, not against each other, but just kind of vying for that date. So we are trying to keep it as close to the date of the event, the actual battle, as possible. And if you've been over there, you know it's extremely, extremely hot.
Yeah.
But
the uniforms, wool uniforms, it's terribly hot.
Yeah.
While we're on this topic, and I write up and down highways and the interstates all the time, and I see battles of less significance. Have you looked towards, I guess it would be a state project for us to have a sign out here on 321 that talked about this important battle?
Sure. One of the things that we've done recently, the National Park Service has a program called the American Battlefield Protection Program, which, as you know, after saying that, we call ABPP. And they have grants every year to help with these protect battle sites, not only Revolutionary War, Civil War, War of 1812. One of the difficult parts, and I don't want to stand up here and talk about all the difficulties, but one of the difficult parts that we face is that the site has been compromised a great deal, with 3 schools being on the site, the stadium, and the practice field, which we really can't do much about that right now. It was done many years ago. What we're trying to figure out right now is a way to work with the State Historic Preservation Office to see if we can get the site listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Because the American Battlefield Protection Program will not provide funding if we can't get it listed on the National Register. And the folks with the State Historic Preservation Office, who are the folks who are partly responsible for that decision or are involved with it, we're trying to press on them to see if there's any possible way we can at least get it deemed potentially eligible for that. So that's one of the things that we're doing. Another thing that we're doing is getting some prices to at least get some signage closer to the site. We may not, be able to get one on the highway or even on North Aspen Street, but even at that corner near Jeb Siegel Road, is to get some sort of signage there that explains that you're even entering the site. So we're working towards that, but as you can imagine, it's money. It's just trying to figure out how to get the funding sources to make that happen, to do that.
How much does the event cost you every year, Jason? You said this county gives you 7,000, and city's been 1,800, 2,000. What does the event cost you?
That amount, the entire amount. It does.
So you basically can spend what you get.
Yeah, and another thing we've done is we've talked about ways to generate income. And that has been a bone of contention with the reenactors. Is they don't want to make it a commercial festival, because last year we asked folks who do, like craftsmen who make baskets and things of that nature, if they would come out and set up and try to sell some things, and we would charge them a booth fee. But again, we're still working, we're having a hard time getting them to do that, because the event's it's still young under our leadership. So we're trying to figure out ways to actually make some money, but it's difficult when we've got the reenactors, who are the reason that people come to see the event. If they're against what we're trying to do, they won't come. So that's, again, where we're trying to figure out how to make that happen, and so we can actually generate some money from the event instead of actually, asking for money every year we do it to make it happen.
What's the pleasure of the council?
We fund the $2,000.
Okay. There's a motion to fund the $2,000. Is there any other discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Laura, there is an item.
I'm sorry.
For you. That's okay.
All right.
I'm sorry. Mr. Bean?
Request, item number 9, request to change the polling place for Lincolnton South Precinct from James W. Warren Citizen Center to William Lynch Gym for all future elections. I'd like to recognize Mr. Bean. How are you tonight?
Very well, yes. Thank you all. Good evening. Thank you for your time and your patience. As we all know, 2012 will be the presidential election year, and we expect a very busy election calendar. And the reason the Lincoln County Board of Election office is asking for the request to change the polling place to the William Lynch Rec Center in place of the Citizen Center lobby. That is the present polling place, meaning the actual voting location for Lincoln South Precinct. The number one reason is the poll workers have requested. That's the first thing that, as new director, they came to me and said, we need to move our polling place. It's such a problem there, and actually I'll go over some of the facts. The poll workers want to make this change. The concerns over the years have been, if a voter has a problem, they are sent to the Board of Elections office on the second floor. And the voter may wait in line at Lincoln South Precinct in the lobby on the first floor. In a presidential election, they may wait an hour, and they get to the poll worker and they'll say, I'm sorry, you have to go upstairs. So they're extremely frustrated, and the poll workers hear that constant problems of people waiting in line, and they need to be on the second floor. And also, it would eliminate this confusion. Also, it would eliminate the parking problems at the Citizen Center, which is a nightmare. And it would also benefit the Lincoln South Precinct voters tremendously. And in conclusion, we went to the William Lynch Center a few months ago and looked at the facility. It's a great facility, and this facility would be extremely user-friendly. It's flat, level. Elderly people, would be so much easier for people to get in and out. And to use all on one floor, all on one level. And met with Richie Haynes and his staff. They were extremely helpful and very pleasant to work with. And my board, of course, would have to adopt a resolution to move the polling place. But of course, we wanted to get permission before we work on a resolution. But that's why we are requesting the move for Lincoln South Precinct. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Bean?
One.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bean, have y'all, when you were looking for locations, did you consider maybe the senior citizen section at Gaston College?
We did, yes, sir. And went to the poll workers first and had their number one suggestion was, of course, the William Lynch Center. And number two would be Gaston College, but parking is maybe even more of a nightmare there than at Citizens Center. So that was a choice, but the poll workers and the board felt like the Lynch Center would be a much better facility, much more accessible, and just a great facility. But that was considered, yes, sir.
I guess one of my biggest concerns here is the recreation center is city owned. I mean, it's not shared with the county and so on. This is city, and I just wonder if that's in the best interest of all concerned to involve the city's property for this particular action.
Yes, sir. We have other facilities in the county, of course, county owned, and we use fire departments or other publicly owned buildings. We do use a couple churches, and that's kind of a last resort. But we have used churches. But usually we try to make it a public building.
Your first point was, if somebody stands in line an hour to vote and then has to go upstairs because of a problem, how does that help them if they're 2 miles away? If they're still gonna have to go upstairs, might as well be in the building.
Well, if there's a problem at a precinct and they send the voter to the Board of Elections, they would not send them to, they would still send them to the Board of Elections, but there would not be a polling place on the first floor where someone comes in and sees the line.
I don't follow the logic. It sounds like to me you're doing them a favor if they're downstairs and they just go back upstairs instead of getting in their car and driving across town. How many days would this affect the Lynch Center?
The May 8th primary, any primary, and of course, the 11th, 6th of November, the general election.
Back at May 8th, November the 6th, and that was it? So 2 days?
Unless there would be a second primary.
That's the one I'm concerned about. That's in July, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any conversations with Richie about that, to the fact that in July, his parking lot's absolutely slam full with people that are swimming and using the park?
Yes, sir. We discussed the May and November, and of course, it wouldn't be a problem at all with that. He said there may be a softball tournament in May, but it would be on the other end of the park also.
Did you discuss with him the July date?
We discussed that, yes, sir, but, and of course, that's always pending. We can't determine that there will always be a second primary.
The reasons you're given to move it, I don't think that's enough reason to move it. I think you can leave it where it is.
I mean, or they'll find some other place, because that isn't our call. They can move where they want to, but.
Well, it's kind of like when they wanted to come up here and vote in the last election. The county did. I mean, you know, we want to be good neighbors, but at the end of the day, it's really not our problem. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I've not heard a good enough, I agree with you. I don't know that I've heard a reason not to have it in the Citizen Center.
Well,
I mean, the parking was an issue in the last election because the county had the parking lot tore up over there.
Yes, sir, it was a nightmare. It was
But
not a
that's-
presidential election.
But that was fixed, you know, since then. I don't know that I've heard anything that's solid about why to move.
You were getting ready to say something, Mr. Meany?
The presidential election, of course, is a whole different ballgame, a whole different category of number of people. That would be using the facility here. And of course, Beth Wise comes to me every week saying, we're gonna move, we're gonna move. So,
Is this something that we need to look into a little further, or is there a motion somebody would like to make, or what's the pleasure of council?
What kind of time frame are you on for having to have this decision from us? I mean, is this something that's time sensitive?
we of course wanted to move as soon as possible because each voter in the precinct would have to receive a letter of a notification of any kind of change. And the resolution is not something, we have something that we could, that's standard for my board. But no, sir, we could, within a month or so, we need to make a decision, of course, with the primary coming up here in a few months.
With a month or so, I'd make the motion that we deny the request to move the polling place to the William Lentz Gym for future elections.
All right, there's a motion to deny the request. Is there any other discussion? Okay. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is denied. Or excuse me, the motion carries, I'm sorry, to deny the deny move.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Okay, item number 10 is continuing discussions and presentation of proposed draft ordinance amendment regarding the keeping of chickens and goats within the city limits.
Thank you, Mayor. In October, the city was asked to amend the city code to allow backyard chickens, and then in December, the city was asked to allow goats. The staff has coordinated with Lincoln County Animal Control and developed draft ordinances that the county indicates could be enforced with their current staffing level at no cost to the city. In the event that City Council wishes to proceed with consideration of these amendments to the code, a public hearing could be scheduled for February. There is draft language in your agenda outlining standards that would have to be met by the animal owner. The draft standards regarding chicken keeping include a cap on the number of chickens, which would be 10 per single-family lot, no allowance for roosters, no outside slaughtering, a requirement for containment of the chickens within a coop that has to be at least 15 feet from adjoining property lines and has to be within the back or the side yards. There's also requirements for adequate spacing within the coop for the number of chickens kept, and there's also sanitation, odor, and noise standards. Regarding goats, the draft standards are somewhat similar with the exception that the lot would need to be at least 1.5 acres in size. There would need to be a limit of 5 goats allowed per lot, and their shelter would be required to be at least 25 feet from the property line. The standards regarding sanitation, odor, and noise would be somewhat similar to the standards regarding chickens. So if council chooses to proceed, we could schedule a public hearing for February. And also, if there are changes or additions that you would like the staff to address regarding the draft standards, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Any questions for Mrs. Simmons?
So the wording in your memo would be the wording in the drafted ordinance?
That's correct.
As I reviewed it, I did have a couple of questions on item number 5 under the chickens. Any fowl houses or chicken coops, must be kept in a neat and sanitary condition at all times and must be cleaned on a regular basis to prevent offensive odors. That's, that could be a matter of opinion right there. That's pretty loose. And then also, no more than 5 goats shall be allowed per single family lot. That's a lot of goats next door.
But the lot has to be 1.5 acres.
That's right. In that case, you would be talking about a larger lot.
Yeah.
But certainly if council feels like that's too many, we can certainly consider a smaller number. And to your earlier point, Mayor, you're right. That's gonna be something that the enforcement officer is gonna have to deal with. If he gets a complaint about odors or any other complaint for that matter, he'll have to go out there and use his judgment to decide whether or not there's a violation here or not. It would all be
Who did you
complaint
say would?
driven.
Who?
This would be enforced by animal control as we currently anticipated, not the city, it would be the county.
See, I think that's your biggest hiccup in the whole thing. Because we clearly have issues with those folks controlling dogs and cats in the city.
Right.
And you add goats and chickens to the mix, I think you're gonna have a line out that door come mid-September. Because somebody's goat jumped a fence and tore up their chicken coop and it smells real bad. I mean, I can just see this coming.
Right.
If somebody could sell me on enforcement, once again, on the surface, it sounds great. And the idea of getting chicken eggs and renewable resource, and I've got real concerns with the enforcement of however the ordinance reads once it's in place.
Other questions or comments?
I did notice one thing, Ms. Simmons. In this, is there any verbiage about if we were to do this, is there any verbiage that we can rescind our action and stop the process of the chickens and the goats? Should that be in there or not? No, I don't know.
You can rescind any city ordinance, can't you, anytime you want.
Yes, sir.
You can
Okay.
rescind an ordinance.
With the understanding, if we, after we have our public hearing and something, I would want the public to realize that.
TJ, you may want to address this. I don't think you could actually have language in there with an option to rescind.
No, I think you're right. I think if any ordinance you got, whatever you got, you can bring it up, put it on the agenda, and vote on whether you want to keep it or not. Anyone we got in the entire book of ordinances. So you wouldn't put anything in the ordinance when you adopt it that you could do that. It's just the way it is.
Yes, sir. Very good.
I also noticed that it says what they can do, but what's the line? If county animal control and go finds something that's not per the ordinance, then what? Do they take the chickens and the goat just like they would a dog?
Ultimately, yes. They would normally send a letter or knock on the door and have a discussion with the owner first and try to achieve compliance that way, and I think that would be the standard. But if they can't achieve compliance, they could always take possession of the animal.
Well, if I could be so, let me ask you, I mean, you've dealt with this, you've talked to municipalities, you've talked to cities, you've clearly done your homework on chickens and goats. I mean, what do you think? I mean, do you think this is a good idea, or do you see it leading to problems?
I think Mr. Emery and I completely share your concerns about enforcement. And with the budget being as tight as it is, I would, and I don't want to speak for Jeff, he can do that, but I would not anticipate that council would want to have resources devoted to this item over other issues that might be more important. And it probably is a good idea to talk about this through the budget process rather than separate and apart from that.
I mean, it's been said over and over. I think you're right. The key to this thing is going to be the ability to enforce. And we're going to be depending on Lincoln County Animal Control. And I hope council doesn't want the city to enforce it, because I think that sets up a whole nother issue. So yeah, I think it's going to all depend on what animal control is, if their ability to say they can.
It'd be interesting, the folks that were sitting here in the 60s and 70s when all the animals were moved out of the city, it'd be interesting to hear their perspective right now.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I've been sitting here squirming. I wasn't gonna say anything. But you'd be surprised how many horses, how many goats, and how many chickens is already in the city limits that's grandfathered. I'm sitting out there with a couple hundred. Had them 30 years. Nobody said a word about it. They're next door neighbors. I've had 3 goats out there to keep the locks eat up. Only reason why I got rid of them is busting the pins to get a hold of the feed. They'd still be there, but I've been grandfathered. You know, I've sat here and heard somebody complain about a chicken being tied to a tree. Everybody like, well, that's correct. But yeah, we've sat up here, since I've been up here, we've had people that are sitting right back in their office come up here, complain about these rock rounder dogs. For us to pass an ordinance, they kill people. Yet we can't pass an ordinance to stop people from having it. Yeah, we can come up here and come down on a little old chicken. You know, that's my point of view of it. I mean, where we sat today, in the 1950s, they were finding when this place was built. Do you know how many ducks and chickens were sitting right here on the court square? I fed them, I know. They were right here all through the 40s and 50s. My grandmother, Miss Russo on North-South Grove, she had a cow up to the 50s. She milked it. I gathered her eggs. She had a hog out there. They did finally get rid of it, because it did smell. But you can take a chicken and put him in a pen. All you got to do is put some sand in there. Rake it out about once every 2 weeks. It depends on how many chickens you got in there. You will never have it to smell. But if it gets damp and wet, it will smell. But if anybody wants to take care of it, which most people will, you won't have a problem. Now, I'm not saying anything.
Well, are there any other questions or points to be made?
And Mayor, I would just point out, if you schedule a hearing, council can take action anytime after the hearing. I mean, it would then be, well, number one, you can schedule a hearing when you want, but even after the hearing, am I right, if they needed time, you can consider it more based on the comments you get, you would have some more time to do that as well. Because I think that's going to be a lot of the key, I would think, will be the comments you get at the hearing.
And if, like Laura said, you want to discuss it at retreat and then have the hearing after further discussion, I don't know, but that's an option.
Right, there's several options you have. But the one thing you have to do before you adopt it is have the hearing.
Sure.
But one question you might consider during the retreat process is, what is Plan B in the event that something does not end up working out with the county being our enforcement agent? Do we have a fallback position in the event that that ends up not working out? Currently, we don't.
What is the pleasure of the council? Excuse me.
I'll make a motion, we postpone, table discussions on keeping chickens and goats within the city limits to the budget retreat this spring. Bring it back up then and look at cost issues and stuff, but let's put it out there till then. Let everybody have plenty of time to let it sink in, talk about it to your constituents, and let's just put it off till then.
Okay, a motion to move the discussion to the planning retreat has been made. Is there any other discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item number 11. Update on the phase 3 of the Marcia H. Clonder Rail Trail and the Eagles. Mrs. Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. With respect to phase 3 of the rail trail, we did receive word recently that the state completed the right-of-way certification process and granted us approval of all that. We currently have a request into the state for an extension on the deadline for the overall project completion, as well as a request to allow us to reserve the low bid for construction rather than rebidding. Once we receive a response from the state on the request to preserve the bid, we'll be able to come back to you with a anticipated schedule for the construction.
I'm sorry, did you say that we did get approval?
We got approval of the right-of-way process.
To keep that original bid?
No,
that's
no,
still.
we have
Okay,
not got
all
approval
right, I'm
yet.
sorry, I misunderstood.
That's the big issue right now.
Yeah, okay, I
We
misunderstood.
have not heard
Okay.
back from them on that. Does council have any questions? Other?
Did they give you any idea when we might hear something?
Oh,
Oh, no.
no.
And I was reading here, did you say we had or had not received any information about extending the date though? So
We
I knew
have.
there was a drop dead date that.
There is currently a drop dead date. We have a request in to Shelby to give us an extension on that. We are very hopeful and optimistic that that one will be granted without much ado, but we actually haven't received the official response yet. The big item is the request to reserve the low bid.
And Eaglewood has said, we'll honor that
They
if the
absolutely
state says
have.
it's okay.
And I assume that from their perspective, they can't wait forever, but at least right now, they are very much wanting to continue to work with us and us with them.
And for what it's worth, we've received opinions from the School of Government that they think keeping the original bid is perfectly legitimate. But again, dealing with DOT, we're at their mercy, but we see no reason we can't use the original bid, but we have to get approval from DOT.
The only concern I would see there, and if Eaglewood said it, that's good, is, most bids have 90-day conditions. And if they haven't gone to their subcontractors and assured that, that would be the only risk I think that's involved in at this point.
May I ask one question? Our dealings with the railroad is taken care of, right? All right. Our main primary concern now is with the North Carolina Department of Transportation.
Yes.
There's no federal involved in that?
I'm sorry.
The request to preserve the low bid does have to go through NCDOT to FHWA. So that's what they're,
To be
okay.
non,
They have, NCDOT has to request approval of the preservation of the low bid from the Federal Highway Administration. That's the source of the money.
Federal.
So they are the ones that will have to give the answer, and it'll flow through NCDOT down to us.
And keep in mind, we've asked this question for about 5 months ago now. So there obviously don't appear to be any big hurry. So we posed this question early on about keeping the low bid.
Okay.
Because their completion date originally was December 12th, I remember that. So it would have been done and people
Right.
walking on
Any other questions? Okay, tell us some good news
Okay.
on Ingalls.
On Ingalls, just quickly, we have gotten confirmation that Ingalls has submitted plans for a building permit and appears to be about 90% roughly complete with what they need to do to get that building permit, so that should be any day now that they receive that. They don't have an exact schedule, of course, for construction that they can share with us, but they did indicate that they hope to be under construction later this year, and typically their construction process is 8 months. So I am thinking that sometime in 12, we would see that store up.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, any questions there? All right, item number 12, discussion of fees associated with city utility services. And I'd like to recognize Mr. Emery and Mrs. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Jetta for putting this together. In recent conversations with the mayor, we talked about, it seemed like there's been several issues come up regarding cities' deposit fees and other issues with city water service. So what we did is when we originally set up our current schedule, we used 4 municipalities as comparisons. There were a couple of key factors in the ones we used. One, we used only electricities. We tried to use cities in our region, and as you'll see, a couple bigger, a couple smaller. We used Maiden, Cherryville, Newton, and Shelby. And I hope this page gives you a good view of how our deposits at least compare to those cities. And then We had also talked about at one time, some additional information about maybe renters paying the deposit up front regardless of good payment history. So we have some additional information here that we've just received. But I basically wanted you to know, have a good feel of what our existing policy was and how it compares, and then see what our schedule is on the back. And I think you'll see for the most part, we're pretty much, on about all areas, pretty much even, or maybe a little bit less than some or more than others in our deposit fee schedule. But again, I know there's a lot going to be talked about at retreat. I don't know if this is something you may want to talk about more then, but I can provide you this additional information, as I said, that we just got. We try to look at these other cities, but we've asked some additional questions, Mayor, that you and I discussed. Like I said, we've asked, do all renters pay the deposit up front regardless of good payment history? After so many months of good payment, our deposits return or applied to their account? Do they accept a letter of credit if services are comparable? And if customers' payment history declines from good to bad, a deposit could be required for continued service. So I'll provide you all this additional information as well.
Okay.
But I think what you were hoping to do, Mayor, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe at least try to get you what we're currently doing, and then maybe council may want to discuss this more at a later time.
Well, the reason I wanted to put it on here is, and two, I just wanted to make sure Georgetta knows that I do understand both sides. If we have folks that run off and don't pay their bill and leave, we're going to hold you accountable to not let that happen. So I understand that, you know, the other side of it. I guess where my logic factor kicked in is when you have somebody that's had a perfect payment record, you know, an elderly lady that's too old to maybe live by herself, and she moves to a rental property where she has some assistance, and she's never been late, she's always paid on time. To me, there's a piece of logic there that needs to be considered, you know, to treat that person or reward the behavior, I guess is what I'm saying. And I realize we certainly want to treat everybody the same, but if there's any guidelines in other communities, I'd be interested in seeing how they're doing it. Is if somebody has a good, for example, if you go to the bank and you have an 800 credit score, you get treated one way. If you have a 600 credit score, you get treated another way, or a 500, you get treated another way. So to me, we'd like to reward those people that you know, that have paid on time for 50 years. So it's sort of the question that I had.
And I think some of this additional information will help you with that.
Okay.
We were just now able to put it together.
Okay. All
But
right.
if you want to put this on the next agenda or something.
Yeah, that would be good. That'd be
You want it on the next February agenda?
Yeah, if we can put it on the February agenda.
And we'll have you additional information.
You see the logic, do y'all understand the logic I was
I
looking
think
at?
at some point, what you're saying is common sense is going to play into the fact that, hey, here's somebody, you know, but I do, my question is, before we move past this, the business piece of this chart that's here. So if I understand this to read that if a business gets a new service of whatever, electric or water, then they're gonna pay $250, say they're like $250 and 2 times the monthly average to get that new service established. If that business is a current business somewhere and moves to a new location, is that still the case?
Yes. Unless they own the building.
Unless they own the building.
Is that correct, Georgette?
Yes, let's say you are John Doe and you own the building, you're not gonna pay a deposit, you're exempt because you're like the owner of that piece of property.
And your deposit goes by a prior history of the building you're moving into. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
That's
Talk about the water, electricity, sewer.
I guess the only thing I'm thinking is if a business is a customer in good standing, clearly, at a location and they move to a different location, I'd hate to think we're discouraging business by doing this again, you know, charging them additional fees if they're in good standing. But I understand there's a fine line there between how do you decide between who you do this and who doesn't. And I know that's the tricky part, and I don't think anybody wants that to fall on their desk of, you're making that decision. That's tough.
And obviously, I mean, you know, these are all council's decisions, but that's why we try to give you some information that may help you in looking at this from what other, you know, comparable cities are doing.
Yeah, I definitely